Hello, everyone. It's Carlos, aka CJ. Want to welcome everyone to another edition of Rogue 420 Interviews. And I'm very excited for today's guest. Today we have Pam Moore, who is the Vice President of Publishing at MJBizDaily. It's a magazine that I follow online and read pretty extensively. Pam has been a business-to-business communicator leader for over 20 years, working in sectors such as diverse as clinical medicine to advanced manufacturing. Always rooted as a journalist, she has led content and strategy for events and media teams at UBM, as well as overseeing the company's internal communication and internal and external rebrand. And in fact, Folio magazine named her a quote-unquote corporate visionary and one of the top women in media. She joined MJBizDaily in the fall of 2019, overseeing the editorial team and media revenue. So Pam, welcome to Rogue 420.
Hey, Carlos, I'm thrilled to be here. And it's funny listening to my own bio. You know, all those sectors I've worked in, none has been as fun and exciting as cannabis, it's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you decided to get into the cannabis space and with your extensive background. How did that start?
Yeah, I'm not the only one making the jump from, mainstream business to cannabis, as it were, because now it is mainstream business. So what I so love about being at MJBizDaily is the power of the journalist team. That the whole business is grounded in the integrity of the content we put out. There's so much hyperbole that happens in an industry that's growing so fast. So I just love that this whole business is rooted in being for real about it, because I think as business people, that's the kind of information we need to really make the business grow.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just in terms of the energy, the diversity in the space, everything ranging from products to compliance. I mean, you name it. It's like a whole nother space. What type of, in regards to your media and the publication at MJBizDaily, why don't you share some of the other content? I believe you guys do a podcast as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've stopped doing the podcast, unfortunately. So we do the website at MJBizDaily.com. That's updated daily with hot news. We channel a bunch of the content that comes in there. We make sure everybody can see it. So we do a daily newsletter with everything that's happening in the industry. We've done a series of webinars and special reports. So we put out a lot of data that's vital to the industry. So both on the site as well as in things like the Marijuana Business Fact Book, which we produce annually, which gives people good data about everything happening. So you can be grounded in fact instead of fiction. So what you're looking at now is the daily website. So it has everything from breaking news to how-to stories. You can see that great feature story today is about vending machines in cannabis. So we try to cover everything all the way from genetics through cultivation, through extraction, through production, through retail. All aspects of the business. There's even some new emphasis on the science aspect of cannabis. And by that, I mean everything from synthetics and like pharmaceutical production through testing in labs.
Yeah, it's a very interesting year overall in general, just in regards to the COVID aspect. But one of the things that I found very interesting in a lot of the states where cannabis is legal was the fact that, for the most part, the industry really continued to thrive and do well, even some of those tougher markets in regards to just the economy, Pam.
Right. And boy, we are seeing so much action around the election, and some of that is economically driven this year. So as we are gearing up for the election, so to your point about the economy, obviously one of the big wins in 2024 cannabis is how many states declared their dispensaries, whether medical or rec, essential. Can you imagine, like 2 years ago, cannabis businesses being declared essential? It's like madness.
Right.
And I think people accepted it. Like, of course it would be. I know here in Denver, there was a brief pause when the governor hadn't made that clear. And there were literally cars for blocks around these dispensaries because people were like, oh my gosh, I have to buy the place out. It was like worse than toilet paper in terms of the desperation. So luckily, he quickly declared that. But it is amazing just to note. We partner with Headset to give us some data on how those retail sales are going during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And we were concerned that as people got more economically strapped, that we'd see less purchasing power. And in fact, that has not been true in most states, and there's some variation. But in most states, revenue is actually up at the dispensary level. The exceptions are places like Las Vegas and Clark County, because so much of that trade was dependent on people going there for pleasure, that kind of fun travel stuff, which isn't happening. Same thing here in Colorado, where I'm based, with all the mountain towns, your Aspen, your Crested Butte, like sales in those tourist towns are down, but otherwise sales are up. And also is basket size, by which I mean the amount that people buy when they come, because they don't want to go every day or every week or whatever.
Right.
The amount people are buying in a given store trip is up.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about it in terms of the sales reporting, because you did see financially that cannabis did well, alcohol, some of those traditional things where I don't want to label it that it's recession proof or anything, but it's a pretty good sign, in fact, that we did see sales revenue increase through that time. Very envious that you're in the beautiful state of Colorado. I guess you guys got a pretty massive amount of snow here, a little bit early, not too long ago.
Yeah, it's the weather and the conditions in Colorado have really been interesting this year. So we did have one super early snow, which, being in this business, it's terrible for the crops, whether people are growing hemp or cannabis. The outdoor grows got snowed on where they weren't being burned out by wildfires. So it's been a tough year for that kind of, the weather here has been impactful. Luckily, our most recent snow hopefully doused some of the fires.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And Pam, I've been following, obviously, the political landscape as well in regards to the industry. I'm based in Indiana. We have a huge battle here in a very conservative state, but we're working very hard to ensure that the next governor is a proponent and supporter of cannabis, and we're hopefully going to accomplish that. But I also know that there are some other states that have some initiatives, and I thought we could maybe share these slides and then discuss a couple of these. Is that all right?
That would be great.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're seeing more ballot box initiatives this year than we have since 2016. And so for you in a more conservative state, and for others, one of the interesting things is, while we'll talk here about 5 key states that have ballot initiatives we'll be hearing about as soon as next week, the implications of so many people voting and seeing just sort of this cultural shift means that we expect other states to follow suit relatively quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very interesting. Arizona, Montana, looks like South Dakota, Mississippi, New Jersey, all those initiatives that are moving forward. And then obviously in regards to the efforts to lobby for federal marijuana reform, also that's pretty extensive, and has seen a lot of momentum pick up nationally.
Right. So this goes to the point of how there's just been a cultural shift. So as my wonderful team of journalists has tracked where the funding is going, we're seeing a lot of lobbying dollars go toward federal marijuana reform and supporting the ballot initiatives on a state level basis. Almost more interestingly, we're seeing a total drop off of funding for the opponents for legalization. So it's just like one of those things that is hit a tipping point where nobody's even against it a lot culturally. Of course, in some legislative seats, it's difficult for some people to say that they would support it. But as there's a groundswell, it just becomes easier and easier for people to put it on ballots, put it in, or pass it legislatively.
Yeah, I mean, even I think nationally, I believe it was last year or 2 years ago, even the Republican Party even adopted cannabis legalization into their party platform. And we continue to see the statistics where I think upwards of 68% of nationally supported some type of legalization, even if for medicinal purposes only. So it's definitely, you mentioned the cultural aspect, and I think that's so important that we are seeing people being a lot more accepting of that, even some of those in those real conservative areas.
Yeah, and of course in 2020, we've seen 2 big issues that are driving that even more. One being COVID and the resulting recession, which is going to drive more states to want the tax revenue that can come from legalization and being able to pull some of that into their coffers. The second one, of course, is the Black Lives Matter movement and calls for social equity. So when you see Kamala Harris on a vice presidential debate stage on national television saying that she's in support of breaking some people out of jail and doing some expungement around cannabis criminalization, it's an amazing pivot point.
Yeah, Pam, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I think that's one of the efforts in terms of not only the legalization cannabis, but also the decriminalization, even removing a lot of the prior convictions that have impacted, so many. So I'm glad to hear you speak that. And I'm sure that any other thing that you would like to add that in regards to, are there any efforts that you follow nationally in regards to the decriminalization, or what are your thoughts overall as we continue to monitor this nationally?
Yeah, in my head right now, like everybody's, I think, is very tied to this election. So we're keeping a close eye as a journalistic team on some of the senatorial races. Arizona is a good example of where if the Senate flips, Arizona has a seat open that would be impactful for legalization and for decriminalization, but also other key Senate races. So if we see the White House flip and the Senate flip to the Democrats and the House remains in the hands of the Democrats, I feel like there's high likelihood of seeing some A, banking reform, and B, some decriminalization coming somewhat soon.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's always odd because we always see the Congress, we always see the bills that are put forth that make so much sense, especially the banking aspect of it. It's like, okay, if financially we're struggling and we're figuring out how to help, the economy in general, one of the best steps that we could do is allow the banking program and relieve that cash market that's so depending on right now in terms of the cannabis industry being a cash-based business, is getting that banking reform passed.
Yeah. Well, with that in view, we should talk about some of the ballot races, because some of the economic pressures are driving some of those, getting some of those ballot initiatives out for next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
So in Arizona, the two biggest states that I'm keeping an eye on for Tuesday are Arizona and New Jersey. So Arizona has such a big medical market already. We're estimating that if the rec or adult use side passes, that market could be as big as a $400 million market at the end of year one.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Another thing that's interesting about that, too, the financial impact that we were just discussing, is the ballot sets a 16% tax rate, which is going to be great for Arizona's coffers. It does have interesting implications for the illicit market. That's a pretty big markup. So that's a challenge that we've seen in California and elsewhere. If the tax rates are too high, of course, the illicit market doesn't really get threatened. It almost gets supported. But that certainly is driving some interest in Arizona to get that money in the bank.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one other thing that's interesting about Arizona is that they're starting by granting those rec or adult use licenses to the folks who already have medical licenses. So they're starting with sort of their home school. That's big business for people like Harvest and Curaleaf, who have been established there for a while. They're really becoming international players at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've witnessed that firsthand as Illinois legalized, and their taxes are pretty extensive. They're pretty heavily taxed in the cannabis industry in Illinois. I was surprised to find that the products I purchased, the taxes were probably 75% of my total purchase. It was pretty ridiculous. It was there. So Arizona, I agree. I lived in Arizona for quite a few years. I've been following the efforts there. I think it's going to be a great marketplace, for the industry overall, in terms of the growth and expansion. It was any other states that are on your radar? Because I want to talk about Michigan for a moment, because I think the social equity programs that are being created, and in part, I did follow Michigan's efforts to ensure that really the efforts that were in place to allow the diversity to come in, and they provide a lot of resources, a lot of tools to help different backgrounds to be able to participate in the cannabis industry, which I think is just so important that everyone has a social equity type program to help them succeed in the industry.
Yeah, it's super important. And I think that where those social equity programs are in place, we've seen mixed, like, actual impact of them. So I'm actually not as familiar with Michigan, but I know in Illinois there's been some, well, and elsewhere there's concerns about people just being proxies. So, whilst someone who's a minority might be the titular, license holder, it's actually being run by somebody like me in the background. So that's kind of a shame. South Dakota this year is interesting on that score too. So South Dakota is another one of the 5 states that have a ballot initiative for this year. They're interesting in 2 ways. One, they're the first state ever to try to legalize both rec and medical in the same year. So why stage step it as things have become more normalized around people's perceptions of cannabis, I guess. But the other thing is that they, the licenses can only go to local people, which is sort of the opposite thing that we're seeing in Arizona, where it's Curaleaf and Harvest who have these like mega, it's an exaggeration, like mega is all relative, but South Dakota certainly is trying to put some emphasis on at least some local people, if not a social equity play, but interesting to watch and see how impactful those attempts really are.
Sure. I like the efforts in regards to the states and them being able to adopt policies that make sense to the people, especially the ballot initiatives. Do you have any concerns in regards to any type of federal legalization if the federal government steps in and then would they, any thoughts in regards to them trying to dictate what the markets are like? Or, for example, I know a lot of people celebrated when Canada had their national legalization that took place. And really, at the end of the day, a lot of people really looked at it was more of kind of like the government takeover of the industry, and a lot of dispensaries had to close and everything. So I think we have to be very careful in terms of how we advocate and how we navigate through that, just to ensure that it always keeps to the really is grassroots type movement that occurred in several states with the ballot initiatives.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that plays out. I know, so I don't have a strong point of view on how that would play out, but the inverse argument to that it would be a federal takeover were it to be legalized is, does it just put things more in the hands of the states? So if something like the MORE Act goes through and we declassify marijuana from being a Schedule I drug, does that make it more like alcohol, where there's state-based programs that regulate how alcohol gets sold state by state? So for example, here in Colorado, you can't, until just very recently, we couldn't get wine or beer in grocery stores, whereas obviously in California, you can get vodka in a grocery store.
Right.
I'm from Pennsylvania, where, I don't know, you had to go to like, these closed off, creepy little skate shops.
Yeah.
So that is not the same as a federal takeover.
Right. Well, Pam, we just got liquor or alcohol sales on Sunday in Indiana like 3 or 4 years ago. So. It's like Sunday, no, you can't. Let's just lock it up and keep it behind glass cabinets. But well, that's great, and I'm glad that with your work that you're doing to keep everyone up to speed on the legislative, on the legalization efforts, and then also you have a pretty big event that's coming up that's right around the corner, and that's MJBizCon 2020. I was able to attend last year's event in Las Vegas. Had a super time. Just the environment, everything from how professionally it's done, the communication to the vendor areas. I probably by far is probably one of the best trade shows that I've ever been to. And now I'm not just saying that because you're here. I really mean that. And then just some of the events outside the place and that were surrounding the city. It was like almost the whole city came together to support that. So you want to share what the plans are this year for MJBizCon?
Yeah, MJBizCon in Vegas is such a blast. So it's too bad we can't be there, but we're doing everything we can to do as much as we can for the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Regardless. Yep. So for starters, MJBizCon, which usually takes place in this very short week in December, this year it starts next week. It starts on November the 2nd, and we're going to start that with some live election coverage. So you can tune in on the 2nd to hear the reporters I work with who are so much smarter than I on this topic. I'm talking with some industry experts about what's at stake in the election. And then we're going to follow that up on November 4th with some results as they are are meaningful for the cannabis industry. Every week then through November, there's going to be more content. So here's what we don't want to do. Make everybody sit in front of their computer screen for a week. Like nobody wants to do that. So we've broken it up into little buckets. So we'll start with election week. We move to a California market forum. We have other forums throughout the month of November for Canada, for other international markets, for our science audience, people who are into the analytical chemistry part of all this. So there's a breakdown there. This not only means that you can just pick the content that you want, it also means that you can network with the people who are interested in the same topics you're interested in. So I love this idea of networking in a virtual event. If you go to, when you went to MJBizCon, it's 35,000 people. Your ability to find the right person to talk to is, I keep comparing it to Tinder. Like, who knows? You might get stuck in the corner with somebody who is not helpful to you at all.
I agree.
And you may never find the person who you really need to meet. So the beauty of networking online is we've queued it all up with multiple ways to connect with people, and you can decide who to talk to and find the people who are going to be most valuable to you. So a great example of this is as you engage, watch a piece of content, like say I'm presenting. Thank God I'm not, because there's, again, much smarter people than me presenting. But if I'm presenting on a given topic, you can see everybody who's attending that same session, and you can therefore connect with them. There's even a sort of artificial intelligence driven, it's like a dating app, connector tool that's part of the program to connect you just with the people you want. So we'll be going all month long, with the apogee being December 2nd to 4th. As part of the December 2nd to 4th, we're not only having, great educational content and connections, but we're also having fun. There's going to be yoga every morning. We've got a mixologist, and we're going to release some of the drink profiles ahead of time so people can buy ingredients. There's even going to be some live DJ and dance party stuff. So not the same as being there, but a heck of a lot better than hiding under the covers.
I completely agree. And I applaud your effort to really, create this because, again, just what you just shared, the ideas of being able to, and it was a struggle. I remember being in that event. By the time that you leave, you have probably 50 to 100 different business cards. And you're like, okay, which person did I want to follow up with? But if we're able to socially use the technology to do that, I think that's going to be even more beneficial. And I just really love the atmosphere that's created with that, with people, because I found most part in our industry, there's so many people that are willing to help people to listen and share ideas and foster that. So I'm glad that you guys were able to still put this together in the times that we're in with COVID. And it looks like it's going to be a great event that's kicking off here, in the next few days.
Yeah, the election coverage next week is going to be exciting. And for right now, audiences can get in for much less than we'd pay for a live MJBizCon. So the price right now is $99. It'll stay that way through November 19th, when it'll go up, take a little bump. And I have a discount for your audience members.
Oh, awesome.
So that's PR2 BizCon 2020, and that's another 10% off.
Wonderful. Well, we really appreciate that. And I did put that in. So if our listeners didn't get a chance to write it down, if you go to the video description, I did put that promo code that's in there as well. I know I plan on participating this year as I did last year, and looking forward to a great team that presents great information. Pam, before we wrap this up, why don't you share any other links that you want to share, or if people want to, what's the best way, if people want to learn more about your work, what's the best route for them to do that?
So everything about MJBizCon this year, you can find at MJBizCon.com. That's the site you're looking at now, with all the information about the event, the full agenda, keynote speakers, etc. By the way, the keynote, one of the big keynote speakers this year is John Mackey, who's the CEO and founder of Whole Foods. He wrote a book called Conscious Capitalism. So the reason he's invited is partly everybody wants to sell CBD in the stores, but more importantly is because how can we make cannabis sustainable, both in terms of financially sustainable, as well as looking for the value for our employees and for the environment, as well as for people like shareholders. Anyway, so MJBizCon.com is the site to go to for the event. And to watch our live election coverage that we're covering on the news site, that's MJBizDaily.com.
Wonderful. Very good. Pam, I want to thank you for a great discussion today, and for our Rogue 420 fans, again, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, go to rogue420.net. Make sure you bookmark that, where you'll find all information regarding hemp, legalization, cannabis. Also, you can follow on Twitter over at rogue_420, and make sure you hit that subscribe and notification bell so you will know whenever we do our next live stream. So, Pam, thank you once again for a great discussion, and let's do this again sometime soon.
I would love to, and I'll see you at MJBizCon.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Pam.
Okay, bye.